And welcome into another episode of Tiger Territory, part of the Foul Territory Network, a Detroit Tigers podcast. I'm Kieran Steckley. With me, as always, is Cody Stavenhagen. And joining us for the first time, your broadcast reporter for the Tigers and Red Wings, Daniella Bruce. Daniella, welcome to the show. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you so much. I'm going to start off by saying that if you guys hear any scratching at a door, I have to lock my dog out of the room when I do these because she will jump up on me and want to be a part of it. So I hope you don't think I'm abusing her or anything, but it is her just scratching at the door if you hear a weird background noise.
We understand.
You're going to fit right in. Both of our dogs have occasionally made appearances on this show. I like it.
Well, like I said, it's great to have you on, Daniella. In a very busy time for you. It's a busy time for Cody. It's a busy time for me, but you especially. So I just gotta, from the jump here, just kind of. I was gonna jokingly say, like, how was your off season? No, for the Tigers, knowing that there is no off season for you. So what have you been up to since the last time we saw you do some Tigers games?
Well, definitely covering some Red Wings hockey, and they've seemed to turn things around since about Christmas. So they're fighting for a playoff spot right now, which has been fun. I did get a little bit of a break. The Four Nations tournament was a 2-week break this year. And then I also got married. So I took some time off for that. The month of February was kind of my time off. And then it was right to spring training and kind of bouncing back between both. So I'm home right now in Detroit for Wings. And then I'll go back to Lakeland for some Tigers next week. And then I go basically Tigers from there. So it's going to be a very, very busy year this year, but I'm excited.
Well, for anyone who missed it, Daniella was recently named the sideline reporter for the Tigers broadcast this year. So congratulations, well-deserved. So you've come a long way from the Word on Woodward days, right?
Oh my goodness, the Word on Woodward rush to beat. Cody was one of our returning guests that came on to talk Tigers. That show actually, though, it did so much. And those that don't know what it was during COVID, during the pandemic, when everything was shut down and nothing was really happening. And we were trying to find a way to and keep some sort of content coming from the Red Wings and Tigers. And it became this 2-hour live streaming show where we had guests on talking about both Red Wings and Tigers. And it was my first taste of doing both. So even though it feels crazy that we did all of that now, I think it's what actually got me into doing both sports and what made me interested in wanting to pursue baseball a little bit more. So it served its purpose. It got us through it. It was fun while it lasted, but man, yeah, have come a long way since then. And thank goodness we're back to regular broadcasts.
For sure. And I asked because I was kind of curious just to better understand your career path. I know you went to Michigan State, but is this kind of what you always envisioned yourself doing, or how did things unfold for you?
Yeah, I've always wanted to be a reporter, a sports reporter of some sort. I didn't have an exact path that I wanted to pursue when I went into college at Michigan State. But as I started to get into it, I knew I liked TV. I like the sideline role. I like hosting a little bit too, if that is going to be a part of the new position with the Tigers. So I'll get to do that a little. So I knew that was kind of the path I wanted to take. I didn't know that hockey would be the first sport that I would break into. I was really open to anything. I had covered a lot of football and basketball at Michigan State and some hockey. I did a lot of basketball and football. So those were the sports I thought I might break into. But when I graduated, it ended up being just a year after that Little Caesars Arena opened. So there were a lot of new positions that the Red Wings were hiring for at that time. And one of them was just their in-arena host reporter position, which I actually didn't get. And they were like, we like you. We want to keep you on. We don't really know in what capacity, but we're going to do something. I'm like, all right, well, I'm fresh out of college, so I'm going to say yes to that, right? Especially with the hometown team. And I became a game night staff member hosting a pregame and intermission show that ran strictly inside Little Caesars Arena for Red Wings games. And from there, my position started to blossom. A year later, I was hired full-time as a reporter, producer type role. And then I started doing radio with Ken Cal, and I actually got to fill in as the color analyst back in 2022 when our color analyst, Paul Woods, was out sick. I filled in for him, which was the start of my radio career. So I did that, did some stuff for Red Wings, and then they wanted to add the position on the Tigers side, which basically is a sideline reporter role that I've done for the past 2 years with Dan Dickerson on the radio and then Ken Cal on the Red Wings side. So it's really just grown from what started as a game night staff position, which is a really cool story. And I'm from here. I grew up in New Baltimore. So being from Detroit and getting to be the homegrown kid that gets to live out her dream here is really a cool story. And I feel like sometimes I do take that for granted because it doesn't happen all that often.
Yeah. And, one of my life philosophies is you got to be open to possibilities. And it seems like what you just described there is someone who was open to possibilities. You didn't know you were going to do this. You end up doing that. And I think that's a great mindset to have. I am curious, speaking of mindsets. So you mentioned, TV, in-game stuff, radio, that all kind of has its own flavor to kind of, to the medium, right? So I'm curious, like, what do you like most, or which one do you prefer, or what's kind of the give and take with having to do TV and radio, and even just like the in-game stuff? Like, what kind of goes into all that for you?
Yeah, I mean, if you asked me which one I liked more, I think I've always wanted to do TV for obvious reasons, right? That is kind of the gold standard in most cases. But radio is very underappreciated sometimes. And I've learned that being involved in it. And these radio play-by-play announcers are incredible. We're blessed with two of the best in Dan Dickerson and Ken Cal. We have Dan Miller too, who's incredible. But just the way that they're able to describe a game, you have to remember viewers can't see anything. If they're listening to the game, they're likely not watching it. Some people do watch it with the radio calls on it, but the way that they're able to describe it and the way that they're so relaxed about it. Radio is a little bit more free flowing than TV is. And that could be because of certain sponsorship elements. That could be just because of things that go into a TV broadcast that you really about in a radio broadcast, but it's a little more relaxed. It's very free flowing. And I learned a lot being involved in radio and just listening to the two of them and being around the teams each and every day. And I feel like it was a great experience for me, and it's going to make me so much better on TV, having done radio for 2 years.
So a couple of years ago, you start breaking into the Tiger space, the baseball space. Was that an adjustment at all? Because sometimes baseball is not the easiest thing to just dive headfirst right into.
I was nervous. I'm not going to lie. And I think it's just because you're going into a new clubhouse locker room with new players that you don't have relationships with yet. You're meeting a whole new group of reporters, the people that cover this team every day. And I think my experience with the Wings, I built some confidence in just the fact like, hey, I can do this. I belong here. Just go in, be yourself, and have fun with it. And it's going to work out. And that's exactly what I did. I feel like the beat writers like me, right, Cody? You can say that. Chris McCoskey is my favorite. I have to give him a shout out. He's not an easy guy to warm up to. And I think I warmed up to him the quickest of anybody ever. So I'll take that. No, love Chris McCoskey, love all the people that work around the organization. Part of it was obviously working for the Red Wings. I knew a lot of people on, the public relations side, the media relations side that kind of had done both. So it felt comfortable going over there. We also have a great group on the Tigers side. AJ Hinch is super welcoming and great and answers any question that you have. So he's awesome. But baseball can be an intimidating sport. But I think having had some experience in a professional sports setting made me feel a little bit more comfortable walking in there. But yeah, learning baseball is something that's kind of crazy to me too. I'm still learning baseball. If I told you I knew everything, I'd be lying to you. There's so much to know, so many things that go into it. And I love learning something new every day. And I think that's part of the fun of baseball is that I truly do learn something different every day.
We're all still learning baseball.
Yeah.
Never stop learning. So you mentioned Dan Dickerson. I've listened to him for years, and then when Cody started covering the Tigers, I was like, is Dan a good guy? I was kind of like hoping for a good answer there, and ringing endorsement from Cody. Just like seemingly everybody has a ringing endorsement regarding Dan. So we have like the professional colleague sense, the fan sense. So now someone who has actually worked with Dan. What makes Dan so special, both seemingly as a person from those who meet him and just anyone who listens to him knows how great he is at his job. But what makes Dan great?
Well, he's the nicest person ever. And I'm not just saying that. Like, he truly is just a great human being. And if you don't know this, his wife, L.A. Dickerson, Lorianne, is a professor at Michigan State. And I actually had her when I was there. A lot of students come in and will shadow both of us. She'll set it up. They've been our production assistants, broadcast assistants. They've filled that role nicely. So Dan's always looking to help out anybody that he can that wants to break into this industry, because he knows how hard it is. Fun, quick story about Dan. I was in LA's class back when I think I was a sophomore at Michigan State. And I was having one of those moments in time where I'm like, am I doing the right thing? Everybody's telling me that there's no money in this field. Like, am I doing the right thing? Should I be pursuing this career? And I was in her class. Dan Dickerson was a guest speaker. After I went up and introduced myself, and he said, you have a phenomenal voice for broadcasting. You got to stick with this. You have to keep with it. And I was like, okay, Dan Dickerson thinks I can do it. I'm going to do it. And turns out probably 10 years later, no, not a full 10, probably 6-7 years later, I was working with Dan in the radio booth. So it was a very cool full circle moment to be able to do that with him. But he's always looking to help other people. Phenomenal broadcaster, understands the game really, really well. He will tell me anything I need to know. And his preparation, that's what makes him so good. Like the way that the work he puts in, he tells me all the time, because I don't really have an off season either. I've spent some time with my family, of course, but he gets right to it. He's prepping for the next season. And it's pretty incredible the work that he puts in behind the scenes to be as good as he is.
Dan, we need to have Dan on sometime, but I called Dan once this off season. I was like, hey, how's it going? What are you doing? And he goes, oh, I'm just transcribing every interview I had with AJ from the entire all last season. And I was like,
Yeah.
what? That is insane. Why would you do that? And he's like, well, you never know when you'll find a little nugget that I can add to my notes and then use on a broadcast. And I was like, oh my gosh, that is next level preparation.
Even the interviews I do with players, he'll have me send to him sometimes so he can transcribe them and have all the info that I got. And I'm like, sure, you can have it. No problem.
And for those who don't work in media, transcribing interviews is like the most tedious, least fun thing, worst part of the job in a way. And this guy is just in the middle of December, transcribing something he did with AJ in May. So that's amazing.
Yeah, he always makes you feel smarter. As you talk about, always learning the game. Listening to Dan definitely makes you a smarter baseball person. Well, we're not going to go back and listen to interviews from the past, but we are going to look forward a little bit. A lot of excitement, obviously, Daniella, regarding the 2025 Tigers. You break the streak. Last season, 2 streaks, just making the postseason, then winning a postseason game. Obviously, a couple of bounces go their way. Maybe the season could have gone a little bit longer, but that's baseball, as they say. What are your expectations for the 2025 version of the Detroit Tigers? A team that is still very young, not a whole lot of additions to the team. And we don't necessarily have to talk about that part, but the fact remains that they didn't really add a whole lot, but it's still a core group that got within a handful of outs from going to the ALCS.
Yeah, I think they are all all the players stepping into this season with the mindset that they want to win the division and that they can win the division, that they're good enough, they have the talent. And I feel like that's a realistic goal for them to set. It'll be interesting to see how they start off, especially with the news surrounding Matt Vierling and Parker Meadows being unsure if he'll start the season on time. But I guess the bright side of that is this is happening early, so hopefully they're back quick and it doesn't happen mid-season. But it'll be interesting to see how that pulls through, because there wasn't a move made. Matt Vierling was going to factor in heavily at that third base spot, likely, or is going to when he's healthy. So how does that play out to start the season? And where do some of the younger guys fit into this? And how does the rotation shape up with Alex Cobb being out, right? I think there are some still question marks about that. We're seeing Kenta Maeda pitch really well, which is a good sign for the spring. We're seeing Jackson Jobe pitch really well, which is a good sign. Casey Mize has pitched pretty well. So I think that they've set this realistic expectation. They've got a core, a lot of talent on this team, but it's going to take some guys taking steps forward and hopefully avoiding some of these injuries that we talk about throughout the season for this team to kind of make that deep playoff run that they want to make this year.
Daniella, you were down in Lakeland for several days, and people always ask me, what's the vibe this spring? And that's always kind of a hard question for me to answer. And sometimes I wonder if I'm just filtering things through my own lens. I always say, these guys are almost more business-like than you would expect. I think maybe that's tied to the confidence the team now has. But what's your answer to that question? What was the vibe like? What stood out to you?
Well, I think this team is always they're a great group to be around, honestly.
Mm-hmm.
The fact that a lot of them came up together and that they are so young and still frankly inexperienced, like they have some now that they, like you said, build some confidence on, but they're fun. They still have fun, I think. And I know that sometimes when you win a lot and sometimes when you're chasing the playoffs all the time, like that can go away, but these guys still have that vibe. And I felt that when I walked into the room for spring training too. But there's also a lot of competition this year, and guys know that. There's guys that want to make this roster, and that's the same said for every spring. But I think this is a really good group where the vibes are always good. Like it's not overly competitive where it's uncomfortable. It's still a fun room to be in, and they look forward to starting the season. So I think they're all happy to be back too, which is crazy. I'm like, don't you guys want your off season to be a little bit longer? They're like, no, after a week or so, we were ready to be back. I'm like, crazy. But yeah, good vibes.
So when I watch any of my favorite teams, I always like, I'm always trying to sell, because obviously I live in Texas, I live in Dallas, so like I got to get people around me interested in my teams if we're going to be watching. So I'm like, this guy went through this, or this thing's going on with his family, and like the human element essentially to these guys. So I'm curious, Daniella, from your perspective, because you're around them so often, like what players, or coaches, whatever, have some of the best stories about their life. You know what I mean? Like who do you find just like really compelling and just like, I like have like high human interest, like this for this season?
They really are good people. I know I work for the team and everybody's probably like, she has to say that, but they all are pretty good people. Right. And I feel like I can take the very obvious answer with Tarek Skubal and the fact that where he came from and how he got how his career unfolded, right? From University of Seattle, not having any scholarships, just all the things that he went through to become a Cy Young pitcher. Like he has great stories there. His family is wonderful. His wife is great. And his son is so cute. And you see him running around spring training now. So you get that human element of it too. I think Parker Meadows has been through a lot too in his career to get to where he's at. Last year, he went through some of the struggles of having to go back down to AAA and kind of coming back and being on a tear. So he's great. Jake Rogers has great stories. He's a Texas boy himself, so he always tells us some fun stories. But I think they all, the bullpen, wait, I could just say the bullpen as a whole. I forgot about that. They're so fun to be around too. They've got all these crazy things that they do. And Will Vest is great. Another guy who's got a phenomenal family that he's building. His wife is great too. Kids are so cute, but you get to see some of that when you're around it every day. And they really do have a great group of guys, both on the baseball field and off too. They're all good people.
Yeah, there were a couple moments this spring, I like amongst the writers, we were kind of like, you know what, we're pretty lucky to have a very good clubhouse to work with.
We also got
I've
to
never,
follow
yeah,
the Riley Green building his house story. I think he was updating us along the entire way last season while he's playing a major league season. His house back home is being remodeled and all this stuff. So he's 24 now, I think. So he was like, this is the first time doing any of that. So it's pretty funny to get that side of them, right? They're learning life and also playing professional baseball. So
yeah, there's a lot of that.
Well, I'm a big fan of the belief that like these character traits that you're talking about, Danielle, they come from the top down. And AJ Hinch is a guy that is obviously respected around the league. We've had him on the podcast. Like he was great. In your opinion, like what makes AJ Hinch so successful? And even just like, from your dealings with him and then just, the stuff you see like on the field.
I just think the way that he builds relationships with everybody is something that not all managers or coaches that I've been around have taken the time to do. And I when I say everybody, I mean everybody, whether it's media, all of his players, and you get results. Players start to trust you a lot, right? Like when they see the way that AJ puts a game together, a lineup together, and they know that it works, they trust him. So he has that ability to get the guys to trust them, get them to buy in, and just be super personable. We were just talking about personalities. AJ's great and he's fun to be around and he fits in with the group really well. So the way that he builds relationships is something that I've always appreciated about him. And even with me, just the way he's accepted me into the media world and he answers the questions I have, even if they are not the best questions. I'm like, hey, like help me out here. I'm going to need you to answer that. And he totally does. And he loves it. And he loves baseball. Like you have to be a manager, I think, but you can really see that radiating off him still in his career.
I want to go back to something you said earlier when you were talking about walking into the new clubhouse. You wanted to just have some confidence, be yourself. Building relationships is a big part of all of our jobs, and probably even more so when you are, you're going to be the team sideline reporter. It's important that there's a level of comfortability with these guys. How did you go about doing that? Did it come easily? And was there any secret? Because you've been very good at it.
Well, some of it for me, it is a little, and I don't mean that as like, oh, my personality is just great, whatever, everybody likes me. That's not what I'm saying. I just have a more outgoing. I'm not afraid to approach people, never really have been. And I think that confidence was a big part of it because I learned that with the Wings. I went through it a little bit on that side, I think, as a younger reporter, trying to learn how to operate a room, learn what I can and can't do in the room, or who I should be talking to when. That's part of the stuff I already knew. So going into baseball, I think I was just more confident going and talking to these players. And my approach has always been, get to know them a little bit before you walk right up to them. And it's like, well, this is what I need today. Let me just check the boxes of everything I need for my stories. It's, how are you? What'd you do with your off day? Or is the family in town? Or, just talking to them about other life things. And this team is great about caring a little bit about everybody else too. Like they'll ask me, or I walk into the clubhouse after, or for spring training this year, and they're all telling me, congratulations, we saw you got married. They're very good about that too, and making a little bit of a personal relationship before the work relationship. And I think that's super important to have with them and to build their trust. Like make sure they do trust you and that you don't do anything to jeopardize that trust, because that can make it really tough to go back in there and rebuild the relationship.
Sure.
Well, since you deal with both, I'm just kind of curious, like what's the main difference between baseball players and hockey players?
I just knocked my light over. You'd think I'd be good at this by now. Okay, there we go. We're good. This is a tough one because I get this question a lot, and I truly love being around both sports, and both teams right now are kind of on the same track, right? Like they're both trying to get over the hump of being a playoff team and being a consistent playoff team and making runs like that. So I think they're in similar spots. Hockey players tend to be a little bit more serious in my experience. They're a little more serious all the time, a little bit more buttoned up all the time than the baseball players have been with me. And I think that kind of does come from the everydayness of baseball. We're around them every day at some point, right? Whether it's, in the morning after the game, whatever, we're around them at some point. So I think that has something to do with it. But I've noticed that hockey players just tend to be slightly more serious, at least on the record.
Well, I mean, that's very interesting because the everyday thing is, but also at the same time, it's not like hockey's a short season either. Those are long seasons as well. So, and also I think, being on skates would bring different personality traits for different guys as well. Actually, who do you think is the best ice skater on the Tigers? That's a good question.
Probably Torque, because he played hockey.
Okay, yeah, that was an easy one. An easy one.
Jake Rogers thinks he can be a goalie, so that's a real thing. Pretty sure he's just like, yeah, I can catch, so I must be able to play goalie too. No, you don't you know what pitches are coming? I'm not sure you know what kind of shots coming at you.
What about the other way? Any Red Wings players think they can play baseball?
No, I've never talked about baseball with them. I've talked about football a lot with them. I feel like they'd all, who would be the best baseball player? Dylan Larkin's, for some reason, I feel like Dylan Larkin could play baseball, but that's just me speculating. I don't know. I'm gonna report back on this. I've asked the hockey question, but I've never asked the hockey players a baseball question.
I bet there could be some pitchers in that room. I don't know why. I just like the physique. Like I feel like they could throw hard with a little bit of work.
I have asked Alex Lyon because of the Jake Rogers conversation. I said, "Hey, do you think since you're a goalie you could catch?" And he said, "Absolutely not." So I don't know. Yeah, I'm not sure how Jake equates it in his head, but I'd like to see it try. I'd like to see him try. I would.
Speaking to the personality thing, like baseball's, I mean, hockey, I guess, is too, but baseball's just such a silly game sometimes. Like it's so long, so many things are out of your control. Just stupid things happen throughout the course of the season. I think these guys learned, like, I mean, it's not like they're all loose all the time. They're also under a lot of pressure, but some of them learn to just like shrug at it and laugh sometimes. I think you can see that.
And I think it's so with baseball players in particular, like they can go through really bad slumps and still get themselves out of it and be okay and just kind of look at you and tell you, yeah, I mean, it happens. It's baseball. Like you're not going to be great all the time. And most sports don't really have that attitude about it. And I've noticed it heavily in baseball. Like if you're a hockey player and you're on a 9-game scoreless streak, like you're not feeling very good about it, And I'm not saying baseball players feel good about being in a slump, but I think they feel confident that they will get out of it, and they've done it before. They've seen it happen before. They know what work they have to do. And with hockey players, they'll get out of it, but it seems a little bit more serious when things like that are happening, where baseball players can kind of, just go with the flow day by day. We play every day. I'm going to get back into it at some point.
So I was curious, Daniella, Cody one time told a story on the podcast of seeing Kirk Gibson and Dennis Eckersley like pass each other in the hallway, and it's like, hey, what's up? And these two guys are linked in history for one of the most important moments in World Series history. And it's just like he was like, it's just like, wow, this is my life. I just saw Gibson and Eckersley just kind of like walk in the hallway.
How's it going? That still like gives me chills. Like what just happened?
So I am curious if there's a moment or moments with you, especially, given these are your hometown teams, where it's just like hot damn, like this is my career. This is my life. I just saw I couldn't imagine seeing something like this or interacting with this person, 10 years ago, or when I didn't know what I was going to do with my life or whatever. I wonder if there's a moment or two for with you for that.
Well, I have a few because of the whole Detroit sports tie, but I do have to say one that wasn't Detroit sports related. The first time I saw Aaron Judge in person, I was walking to the clubhouse and we kind of walked past each other. I was like, oh my gosh, that's Aaron Judge, which is, and he's huge, he's massive. So that was another thing where that was one of the things that was shocking. But Miguel Cabrera, I was so excited that I got to work at the end of his career, cover his final season as a Tiger. That was really, really cool. And for me, I had never met Jim Leyland before I started working with the Tigers. And that lived up to every expectation I ever had. I love every time I see Jim Leyland now. I actually have a funny story. No secret that he likes to smoke a cigarette or two. He asked me one time, he goes, hey, you want a cigarette? And we were in the dugout. And I'm like, no, I'm good. I don't smoke cigarettes. And I look back on that all the time. Why didn't I just smoke a cigarette with Jim?
Yeah, take it.
I got the same story. I was an intern, 2015. I'm covering the Texas Rangers. Ron Washington was an assistant with the A's. I was doing a story and met him down in the dugout. I'm 20, 21. Sit down next to this guy, and I'm kind of nervous just to talk to him. He crosses his legs, pulls out a heater. You want one? And I was just like, I'm an intern. Number one, I don't really smoke. Number two, I'm not going to smoke in the dugout. So I said no. And just like that, I think all the time, why did I not smoke a cigarette with Ron Washington? Come on. Jim's never offered me a cigarette. What the hell? Come on.
I'm doing it. If Jim Leyland ever offers me another cigarette, if you see me smoking it, no, you didn't, because I didn't.
Everybody's got to have everybody's got their limits, right? And Jim Leyland and Ron Washington definitely check that box, right? Yeah, it's okay. The expression doesn't count. Those cigarettes don't count.
There's some good hockey ones too. Obviously, Steve Yzerman is the Red Wings general manager. Nick Lidstrom is around all the time. Chris Draper. So those guys, and Darren McCarty, he's around all the time. I see him all the time. So those guys were your childhood heroes at some point, right? When you're growing up with those teams in the 90s. So yeah, I've met some pretty cool people along the way, and now it feels kind of normal, which again, sometimes I have to step back and be like, don't take that for granted. That's pretty freaking cool that that's what you get to do for work.
Yeah, very cool. So I guess we'll wrap up this way. I know we talked about expectations, but is there something that you're most looking forward to? I know it kind of seems like a similar question, but what are you most looking forward to with the team, or particular player or whatever with the Tigers this year?
I think what I'm most looking forward to this year is just seeing how they respond after a run like last year, because it was pretty magical. It was pretty improbable. How do you respond to something like that? And I think that'll say a lot about this team. And watching Tarek Skubal pitch a Cy Young season, how does he respond to that? Like, what does his follow-up year look like? I think there's so many good storylines surrounding this team. There's battles at third base, which is going to be interesting to see what they do there. There's going to be the Spencer Torkelson. Is he going to make a bid to be on this opening day roster? I think he's going to want to, right? Like that's the goal here, and seeing how his story pans out. So I think there's a lot of really good stuff to watch this year, and how the rotation's going to finish out for, they say this, and I know it's cliche, but the opening day roster for pitching, like it's great. But everybody, I feel like they're going to need all of these pitchers. So to have everybody pitching well is a really good thing right now. So hopefully we see that kind of go into the season as well. But I think overall, it's just how does this team respond? Because now there are expectations, not only internally, but externally, fans, the organization, everybody has some higher expectations for them this year.
I feel like every time we talk about this team and the roster battles, we're like, I mean, but we'll see them all at some point this season.
That's what the hard thing is, because is it really a battle at third, or do we know that they'll probably platoon since they don't have the everyday third baseman? I know AJ has told me he would love an everyday third baseman and hopes somebody does take the reins on that, but I don't know if that's going to be the case on the team they have right now.
Well, no, but I'm just like, in a way, you hope we don't have to see all them, because that means people are either struggling or injured. But also, it's baseball, and the reality is, no, we probably one way or another are going to see every single one of them at some point. So,
yeah, status battle. You made the opening day roster, or whatever. You know, it's like you know, starting five in basketball. Does it really matter, or does it matter who finishes the game? You know, so that's kind of how I look at it.
And there's the Javi Baez story too. Like, did the surgery help him? Is he going to be better this year? So Trey Sweeney has been great for the Tigers leading up to this point. So how that position plays out too is interesting. Lots of stories.
Yeah. And how the fans are. For me, it's like how the fans are. Like, you know, what kind of environment is Comerica going to be? Especially, like, you know, look at the highlights from last season. You know, a lot of those games, it's, you know, there's a lot of seat backs that you see, you know what I mean? So I'd like to see Comerica kind of return. It's not going to be every game, obviously, but kind of return to, you know, basically what I grew up with it being, which is one of the most fun venues in baseball. So that would be one of the things I'm looking forward to as well. All right. Well, a lot of fun discussions, a lot of fun little stories and tidbits from Danielle. We thank you so much for joining us. You guys can follow us on X. You can follow us on Instagram. You can follow us on YouTube, Apple, Spotify, wherever you get your podcast. Want to plug anything, Daniela, before we get out of here, where people can find you?
You can just follow me on social media at Daniella Bruce _ on all the things, all the different platforms. So you can follow me there.
You heard her. All the things. All right. Well, once again, thank you very much, Daniela. For Cody Stavenhagen and Daniella Bruce, I'm Kieran Steckley. Everybody have a great day.